The wind that swept across the Shield Islands carried salt and sorrow in equal measure. On the eve of battle, as the last light of Targaryen banners faded behind the horizon, the people of Westeros stood uncertain at the threshold of history rewritten. No roaring wings would darken the sky. No dragonfire would judge the sinners and bless the loyal. The legend of Aegon's conquest, of 3 dragons lighting up 1,000 castles, remained a tale unspoken, a dream that never tore through the mists of legend to become flesh. In its place, the long night of discord and war stretched on, an endless winter of human ambition. Stead Starfall, the Dornish lord whose granite heart had seen too many betrayals, lay prostrate before the fallen figure of his wife, Lady Marana Starfall, once glittering as a gem in the court of Highgarden, had fallen in the last desperate stand atop the cliffs. As the Iron Throne remained as contested as ever, Stead's grief was more than personal. It was emblematic of a realm bereft of unity. The Targaryens had sailed westward from Valyria, but the doom had shattered their ambition. Aegon the Conqueror, only a child when the Black Tempest consumed the smoking ruins of his homeland, had grown to manhood haunted by the absence of dragonflame. He gathered a small armada, but without Balerian's shadow to cow the kings of Westeros. His hosts were butchered piecemeal by mountain clans, Dornish spearmen, and iron-born reavers alike. North of the Neck, in the labyrinthine forests of the Wolfswood, the Starks paced like restless ghosts. Winterfell's walls, ancient gray stones carved by hands long turned to dust, had never felt so hollow. Lord Edric Stark watched as his bannermen exchanged glances over their cups, weary of the promise of conquest that never arrived from across the narrow sea. The clans beyond the Wolfswood's edge remained independent. The She-Bear and the Black Wolf clashed as if freed from the yoke of a foreign invader. Even as wildling raiders pressed southward beneath swaying pines, it was neighbor who bore the greater threat. Meanwhile, the Tullys of Riverrun, accustomed to High Lords bearing off diversions from the capital, found it impossible to believe that Maegor Targaryen still languished in his obsidian tower. The Mad King, never sated by cruelty, had sought to seize the crown with steel alone. His dragons consumed by the same cataclysm that obliterated Valyria's glories. Under the weight of suspicion and fate, the Riverlands seethed with nobles who bent their allegiance to any who promised victory. Sir Humphrey Tully, kneeling before the broken face of the River Queen's statue, dared to hope that the old songs of the 7 gods might yet unite the realm. If only one lord could seize the spirit of Aegon, not in flesh and flame, but in iron and justice. To the south, in the sun-scorched fields of Dorne, the memory of Aegon's landing was as foreign as ice. Prince Aerys, father to the boy king, had sent word of succession and rightful claim. But the Dornish princes, schooled in their own brand of honor and cunning, rejected the pale fire of Valyrian prophecy. The spears of the sand snakes cut short any fleet that dared slip past the Boneway. And so Dorne remained unconquered, a proud bastion of independence, its sands untainted by the blood of a foreign dragon's maw.e. All this turmoil, and yet the greatest upheaval lay beyond the Shield Islands, where Aegon had dreamed of raising his banner beneath a sky split by dragon wings. The black iron of a horn, once destined to summon terror, remained silent. Hastings and Harrenhal, Griffin's Roost and the weeping cliffs of Dragonstone, all stood as mute reminders of ambitions unfulfilled. Young Aegon, his spirit tempered by loss, retreated into the solitude of exile. His dreams of forging a realm's destiny upon draconic fire had drowned in the sea's bitter brine. Yet hope, fickle as a summer breeze, lingered even now. Maekar Targaryen, Aegon's eldest brother, refused to surrender the legacy of old Valyria to history's cold forgetfulness. He rallied those few lords who still whispered oaths to dragon lords, carving out a holdfast atop Dragonstone with the sweat of exiles and the steel of deserters. From its cupola, bar-flung ravens flew east to Pentos, Volantis, and beyond, begging for the seeds of resurgence: gold to buy ships, soldiers to train, sorcery to coax dragons from stone. Some believed that in the smoking ruins of the dragon pit, buried eggs, coated in ash and legend, might still cling to the breath of life, awaiting the right crucible of magic and blood. Back on the mainland, the great houses jockeyed for advantage in the vacuum left by Targaryen failure. The Iron Islands launched a fleet of 13 Drakars, sea-splintering to sack the arbor and choke Blackwater Rush with burning timbers. The Reach Lords, loyal to no king, plotted to elevate one of their own, proposing a High King of Westeros, seated at Old Stones, overlooking the ruins of the first men's sacred groves. Some youthful lords dared speak of crowning a Stormlander, whose steadfast courage might unite the 7 kingdoms where dragons could not. And in the east, beyond the Jade Sea, the free cities watched with sharpened interest. The faceless men of Braavos whispered that destiny in Westeros lay in mortal hands, mortals unafraid to bleed for power. Slavers' Bay burned with new zeal as slavers rode forth to claim captives from the Reach. Even the distant citadel of Old Town, bastion of maesters, murmured that prophecy can die with the seers who utter it, that no dragonborn can remake the world. In that shattered realm, Aegon stood on the battlements of Dragonstone, his eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight that danced across the stone towers. He wore no crown, for none had been forged for a king without dragons. Yet in the tremor of his jaw dwelt the stubborn ember of his father's dream, to see Westeros made whole under a single banner. Beneath him, the sea gnashed at the cliffs, as if demanding swift action. Without Balerion's roar to cleave the night, without Merax's wings to scatter the foes of Conquest, Aegon knew he must rely upon something more subtle. Alliance, promise, the written word of oath and contract. He would need to commit treachery and mercy in equal measure, to spread rumor like wildfire, to let the idea of his rule grow in the hearts of lords until it burst forth in rebellion. He smiled, thin and determined. The realm might lack dragonfire, but it brimmed with the fuel of ambition. And ambition, unlike dragons, could never be truly extinguished. Thus began the war that should never have been, the war for Westeros unlit by draconic flame. A war of men's hearts and cunning blades, of broken alliances and shifting loyalties. In the years to come, the 7 kingdoms would bleed more than they ever would have under dragonfire, for the promise of unity outweighed the certainty of fear. And Aegon's armada, though bereft of Dragonwing, would find its salvation not in conquest, but in compelling a realm to raise its banners, not in terror, but in the inexorable magnetism of a single unifying dream. On the morrow, the first battle lines would be drawn at the mouth of Blackwater Rush. Across its muddy banks, the forces of the king at Storm's End would face down the drowned men of Pike. The Dornishmen, content to watch from afar, would trickle southward, waiting for the victor's feast. The Starks would march from Winterfell, uncertain whether to keep their ancient neutrality or seize a place at the table of a new king. And Maekar Targaryen, ruling nothing but his own resolve, would send word to Aegon, not yet. For in this new age, kings would be made by blood-slaunched victory as much as by draconic blood. And though dragons never reached the battlements of King's Landing, the brood of men's ambition proved more formidable than any wings of flame. Oh, Kandi. Oh, Ei. A pale dawn broke over the mouth of Blackwater Rush, turning the sluggish river to molten silver and setting each blade of dew-tipped grass ablaze with faint light. On the northern bank, banners of the Stormlands and the Riverlands fluttered in uneasy alliance. A purple stag crowned by a golden sun, and a silver trout entwined with a blood-red spear. Across the breadth of the Rush, beyond the waist-high reeds, the iron-gray prows of the Iron Islanders rode low in the water, their sails furled, their oars at rest. Between them lay the battlefield that would decide whether men without dragonfire could cleave the 7 kingdoms in two, or bind them ever closer into a single fractious realm. On the Stormlander side, Lord Argyll Baratheon of Storm's End rode among his knights, the hooves of his destrier thundering like distant thunder. His dark hair hung in damp locks around his helmet, and his eyes, steel gray as the sea in winter, reflected both pride and unease. He was a warrior born. His sinews coiled like bowstrings beneath his gambeson, and yet even he felt the weight of destiny press upon him. He glanced to his right, where Sir Tybalt Connington, the Griffin, blew the war horn that would summon the charge. Tybalt's broad shoulders heaved, The man looked ready to fly at the very gods themselves in his eagerness. Argyll offered him a curt nod, and Sir Tybalt's horn echoed across the water, a harsh, triumphant cry that set hundreds of helmets to nodding. Below them, on the marshy bank, foot soldiers in quilted jackboots manned wooden pavilions, ramshackle towers designed to hurl bolts and spears. Archers strung their longbows, the sinew whispering under leather loops. Slingers scooped handfuls of smooth river stones, their fingers tasting grit and promise. Around them, a motley assortment of mercenaries, Braavosi sellswords, Dornish spearmen in padded white tunics, even a handful of exiles from the disputed lands, jostled for position, eager to turn the tide of war and earn their penny. Across the river, the Ironborn readied themselves. Lord Aegon Greyjoy, called the moniker, stood at the prow of the largest longship, his arms folded beneath a patched leather coat and a cloak of sea-washed gray, his face scarred by knives and brine, bore the complacent calm of a man born to conquer. He glanced down the line of vessels, 13 in all, each crammed with salted savages, their eyes gleaming. No dragons soared above them to give courage, only the promise of spoil and the briny air of the narrow sea. Yet he knew these were the true children of Aegon's failure, men who worshipped waves rather than wings. When Connington's horn died away, Aeron lifted his own war horn, a whale's bone carved with runes, against his lips and bellowed. The sound rolled across the water like a tidal wave of anger. From the holds of each drakkar came the barked orders, axes lifted, steel flashed. The Ironborn warriors knelt at the bows, ready to surge forward on a tide of oars. Then the signal came. A single bolt loosed from the Stormlander towers, its steel point dipped in tar to burn. It sailed above the reed beds, a tiny comet against the red-gold sky, and plunged into the prow of the nearest drakkar. Within seconds, smoke curled from the ranks, a dark promise that the first blood of Conquest would be spilled. Argyll Baratheon felt his heart quicken. This was no mere skirmish. This was history unfolding without dragonfire. "Archers," he roared, striding down the causeway built of plank and earth. "Aim for their prow. Let them drown with steel in their sides." Down below, the archers obeyed, sending a hail of arrows across the water. The missiles arced like deadly rain, rattling against shields and thunking into oaken hulls. Men fell with gasp and curse, plunging into the shallows as their ships lurched beneath the volley. A cheer rose from the Stormlanders. Argyll allowed himself a flicker of hope. On the Ironborn side, Aegon Greyjoy did not flinch. He bore a two-handed axe across his back and gripped a netted harpoon in one fist. "Let them come," he snarled to his captains. "We bleed wetlanders here." He stooped to the oarsmen, delivered a curt order in the low Valyrian patois that lingered in the salt wick. The men below grunted and bent to their work. With a synchronized heave, the 13 longships lunged forward, oars splashing, filling the air with the chant of iron and sea. The Ironborn surged. At the midway point, the struggle became a tumult of steel and screaming men. The rush itself was shallow, no more than waist-high in places, and Ironborn warriors waded ashore on the Stormlander's side as the latter surged forward on the overturned hulls. Spears clashed against axes. Horses reared and fell in the churn of water. Argyll fought at the vanguard, his great warhammer singing a savage tune as it smashed through helm and plate. Yet every time he felled one foe, another Ironborn slipped past to strike at his flank. High above the clash, a lone figure watched from a ridge 2 leagues away. Aegon Targaryen, unarmored save for a simple surcoat bearing the faded tide mark of Blackfire. His hair was clipped short, his youth marked by a faint bloom that made him look almost soft in silhouette. But his eyes blazed with fierce intelligence as he studied the battle. Beside him, Maekar scribbled in a small leather tome, noting troop movements, casualties, the ebb and flow of fortune. "They fight like wild dogs," Aegon murmured, his gaze never slipping from the fray. "Without dragons, it is men's courage that must bind them, not terror." Maekar nodded, closing his notebook. "Your Grace," he ventured gently, "I believe the Stormlanders hold the field, but we must forestall Greyjoy's raiders." If word reaches the Reach and the Vale that we falter, they will rise against us." Aegon's lips curved in a thin smile. "Then we give them a spectacle worth the telling." He raised a hand, and a hornblower below, nestled in the rocks, sounded the call for the Targaryen host to move. From the forested ridge, the host surged. Banners bearing the dragon's broken talon, knights in battered armor, footmen in patched mail. They charged down the slope at a gallop. At first, the Stormlanders blinked at the new host, uncertain whether to cheer or curse. But when the Targaryens joined their flanks, steel ringing in steel, the momentum shifted. Outnumbered Ironborn, now pinched between two hosts, began to falter. Under Aegon's banner, the Stormlander phalanx vaulted into the gap, driving a wedge straight through Aeron's left. The longships, hemmed in by pikes and horses, withered like helpless fish. Aeron roared and leapt to meet his foes, but he found himself struggling in the muck, his heavy cloak waterlogged, his axe arm slowed by the tug of the current. A blow cleaved through the back of his leather jerkin, cleaved deeper than armor ever could, and he fell to his knees in the black water. Around him his captains fought on, but their rage could not stave off numbers. Within half an hour, the rush was theirs. The Ironborn saved what vessels they could and fled upriver. The rest were butchered or scattered, leaving the water slick with oil and blood. When the dust of battle settled, Argyll Baratheon approached Aegon across the battlefield. The Stormlord's armor, once polished, was streaked with mud and crimson. His golden stag banner drooped. Yet in his eyes blazed the old fire of knighthood, undimmed by defeat. "King Aegon," he said, voice carrying across the shuddering quiet, "without dragonfire, you have taught us fear." Aegon dismounted, boots squelching in the shallows. He extended a gauntleted hand. "Lord Baratheon," he replied, "fear is a weapon, but only loyalty shapes a kingdom. Drink from my cup, and let us swear the oaths that bind men's hearts stronger than dragons' wings." Argyll hesitated only a heartbeat, then grasped Aegon's hand. "I drink," he said, "and I swear fealty to House Targaryen, broken dragons though they may be. So long as you prove worthy of the crown you seek." Aegon inclined his head. "Then let us ride to King's Landing," he declared, voice rising even above the cheers of the assembled host. "Let the Iron Throne see at last that it answers not to flame, but to the will of men unafraid to bleed for a dream." Thus, on the blood-soaked fields of Blackwater Rush, the first true step of Aegon's conquest without dragons was taken. Word of the victory spread like wildfire across the Seven Kingdoms. In the Reach, the Manderlords debated whether to render homage or rise in defiance. In the Vale, Lady Lynesse Arryn dispatched riders to parley. In Dorne, the sand-schooled princes watched with wary curiosity. Only the wall remained untouched, its gray stones a reminder that some things, like the cold, like the Northmen's independence, bowed neither to dragon nor king. As Aegon's host marched southward along the King's Road, the Targaryen banners, once symbols of a dream lost, now fluttered with new purpose. And though the sky remained empty of wings, it was filled with the clang of steel and the thunder of hooves, the beating heart of a realm reborn by men's courage alone. In the dark towers of King's Landing, under the silent gaze of the Iron Throne, the Game of Thrones would begin anew. This time played not by dragonlords, but by mortal kings whose blades and vows would shape the future of Westeros. The pavestones of King's Landing gleamed like bruised iron beneath a leaden sky as Aegon's host crested the final hill before the city gates. No dragon's roar heralded their arrival, only the distant clang of armor and the steady tramp of 10,000 marching feet. Along the King's Road, peasants knelt with fists raised in prayer. Merchants shuttered their stalls, and children peered from behind shuttered windows, eyes wide at the banners of fractured dragons, flapping like torn sails in the chill wind. Ahead of the vanguard rode Sir Argyll Baratheon, astride his black destrier, the son and stag of his house, a bold contrast against Aegon's standard of a broken talon. He cast a searching glance at the sea of steel and cloth of gold at his back, then lifted a gauntleted hand in salute to the city's looming walls. "So this is King's Landing," he murmured, voice low and awed. "A fortress of stone and shadow, built to withstand gods and men alike." Beside him, Aegon Targaryen sat astride a modest gelding, his surcoat stained with river mud and the blood of Ironborn. The faint bloom of youth had deepened into a resolute hardness around his pale eyes, as though the memory of every fallen comrade had etched itself upon his soul. "The walls are strong, Lord Baratheon," he replied. "But ambition, like water, finds every crack. We need no dragon's flame to break this city, only the courage to strike where they least expect." And below the walls, the Red Keep's battlements bristled with defenders. Captain Duran of the City Watch paced the ramparts in anxious circles, his bearskin cloak swirling like mist about his armored boots. He counted the banners: Tully's trout, Baratheon's stag, Aaron's falcon. Each pledged now, uncertainly, to a king without wings. He cursed the folly that had allowed this ragged host to coalesce beyond the Blackwater gates. "Where are the king's own banners?" he snarled at a passing archer. "Where are the gold cloaks?" In the dungeons beneath Maegor's Holdfast, Grand Maester Abros readied his towers of ravens, sending urgent messages to Storm's End, River Run, even the Eyrie. If Aegon's allies could be peeled away before the siege tightened, the city might yet hold. But deep in his breast, the Maester feared that the common folk, hardened by years of tyranny and sudden hope, would rise in rebellion from within, tearing the city apart before steel could do its work. At midday, drums rolled along the city wall. From the Watergate to the Dragon's Gate, red-cloaked watchmen bellowed defiance and waited for the onslaught. At the Lion Gate, Sir Oswell Lannister, uncle to the current Lord of Casterly Rock, stood with folded arms, his lion helm tucked beneath his arm, and his golden cloak bright against the sandstone. He spat into the dust. "They'll break upon the walls like waves upon the shore," he said to his captain. "No dragon, no matter. It is iron and heartbreak, I trust." Aegon surveyed the defenses from the field below, his captains arrayed before him in careful ranks. "We begin with a demonstration," he announced, voice carrying across the plain. "Divide your forces. Half will besiege the gates, half will march about the city to cut off escape and supplies. We will show them our strength, and then we will give them choice: open the gates, or face the ruin of their homes." Murmurs rippled through the ranks. Sir Tybalt Connington raised a fist, roaring his agreement. Sir Argyll knelt to whisper a prayer for victory. As the host split, Aegon mounted his horse and rode with the siege engines, catapults, ballistae, and giant harpoons, toward the great gate. Alongside him strode Maekar, the older brother whose calm wisdom balanced his siblings' fiery resolve. Maekar unrolled a sheaf of parchment. "We need to secure 3 points, he pointed. "This gate, the quay where supply barges land, and that outermost barbican. Take those, and the city starves before it can lift a sword." Argyll Baratheon dismounted to inspect the trebuchet crews. Children and conscripts heaved logs into the fire pit. Smiths hammered reinforcements on iron bands. The engines groaned like ancient beasts rousing from slumber. Aegon laid a hand upon one great wheel. "In Dragonstone we would have lit this match with dragonfire," he said softly. "Here, we will kindle it with men's hands and hearts." Before the engines could be fired, a white flag fluttered from the walls. A single raven perched upon its crossbeam. Aegon exchanged a look with Maekar. From the battlements descended a powdered herald, his tabard bearing the 7-pointed star of the realm. Kneeling upon the field of mud, he unrolled his message. "To Aegon, called Conqueror, though dragons fail you, know that the Sea Dragon and the great Kraken pledge no fealty to a Targaryen who bids without flame. While you besiege these stones, this city offers terms. Submit to the Council of Seven, that our realms be governed by merit, not by Valyrian blood. Open the gates, abandon your arms, and receive safe passage beyond the narrow sea. Refuse." A hush fell upon the assembled armies. Argyll turned pale. Tybald's hand twitched toward his sword. Aegon's face remained unreadable. Slowly, with the patience of a man who has seen his childhood's dream burn away, he rose in his stirrups. "A council of lords," he mused aloud. "A mortal crown bestowed by intrigue rather than victory. Such is the choice of men who fear the sword more than their oaths. He wheeled his horse. Send word to the defenders. I will grant them 3 days to reconsider. After that, the siege will begin in earnest. Let every catapult be ready. Let every tower be manned. Turning back to his captains, he spoke as if revealing a hidden truth. We will not break the city's walls with stone alone. We will break its will with the certainty of our cause. Spread word to the reach and the vale that mercy is offered, but only to those who bow. Then let the people of King's Landing decide if they would stand against hope itself. Benderhal, da. The herald, eyes wide with awe, ducked and scurried back to the ladder. As he climbed, Aegon's gaze followed the tattered pennon fluttering above the great gate. Around him, the gathered lords found new purpose. Bannermen who had doubted the strength of a dragonless king now felt that their swords would write history. That night, by the flicker of campfires, envoys from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms arrived. A white-haired envoy of House Hightower, a youth in green from the Reach, even a dogged knight from Storm's End bearing a silver chalice. All brought messages, some to swear fealty, others to bide time, still others to whisper of treachery in the king's own household. Aegon received them with ice in his veins and fire in his words, for he knew that the greatest battles would be fought not at the walls, but in the hearts of men. As the moon rose, Aegon and Maekar climbed a mound of earth to survey the city's lights. Below, lanterns glowed within the Red Keep. The narrow alleys lay dark and silent. Somewhere in those silent streets, the old Kingsguard plotted, the small council debated, and common folk trembled. Aegon closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every step that had brought him here. From the ash-choked ruins of Valeria to the waters of Blackwater Rush. You think they will yield? Maekar asked softly. Aegon opened his eyes, as pale and fierce as dragonfire. I think they will tremble, as all men tremble before a dream that refuses to die. He laid a hand upon his brother's shoulder. And when they tremble, we will give them a choice between surrender and oblivion. For a king without dragons, what greater weapon is there than the fear of falling into nothing? Below them, King's Landing slept uneasy, its fate poised between mercy and ruin. In the cold pre-dawn haze, the future of Westeros hung upon 3 flags and a promise that even without dragons, a single man's resolve could reshape the world. And when the sun climbed the sky, it would find Aegon Targaryen waiting, an unbroken talon poised to claim what once belonged to dragonlords. The first light of dawn crept over the western rooftops of King's Landing, turning slate and copper to pale lavender. From the great mound outside the city walls, Aegon Targaryen watched as the capital stirred. Lanterns winked out in winding alleys. The silver bells of the great sept tolled their morning prayers. Below, along the riverbank, the quarried stone of the Red Keep rose like a watchful giant, its dark windows promising both refuge and resistance. Aegon turned his horse, blood-tied, so that his back was to the city. Around him, the Targaryen host prepared for the day's campaign. Engineers tended the siege engines through a haze of lantern smoke. Archery instructors drilled recruits in the placement of the bow. Cooks hauled cauldrons of porridge to feed the weary and eager alike. Across the line, banners of the Reach, the Stormlands, and even a handful of Dornish lords snapped in the breeze, each one a testament to the fragile alliances forged in battle, rather than by dragonfire. Maekar Targaryen joined him, cloaked against the morning chill. The gold cloaks report that food stores within the city hold for a fortnight, maybe 3 weeks if strictly rationed, he said softly. Should we storm the walls, it will bloody every man beneath them. Should we starve them out, it will break the city's spirit, but cost us weeks we may not have. Then? Aegon considered the distant silhouette of the walls. Patience is a weapon, he replied, but one we wield only as long as the hunger of our host will bear it. Send word to Lord Argyll. I'll ride to the Rosewad at midday to meet him. I intend to offer King's Landing one final chance, water and grain for their people in exchange for their gates. He paused. But if their terms echo that Council of 7, we ride away and let the city remember what hope costs. Without another word, he spurred blood-tied down the slope toward the Rosewad, hoofbeats drumming a measured march. A retinue of mounted knights, Sir Tybalt Connington and a dozen of his griffin-emblazoned men, fell in alongside. Ahead, Argyll Baratheon waited, his armor cleaned in the brief night, but streaked with the memory of mud. "Your Grace," Argyll greeted, bowing low. "My scouts report a surge in commoner unrest. Some slums near Flea Bottom murmur of rebellion. Masked men organizing tore down a watchtower before the Goldcloaks quelled them." His voice darkened. "If we wait, the city will starve. If we charge, the walls will drown our banners in flame and blood." Aegon nodded. "Then we give them terms they cannot refuse." He dismounted, handing Bloodtide to a groom. Lifting a hand in greeting to Argyll's knights, he unclasped his helm. His hair was tousled, pale as ash, his face drawn but resolute. "Ride with me to the Watergate. I will send a herald within with our offer. No ambush. Goldcloaks and City Watch will escort him. Let every man see that mercy precedes steel." Then, with that, they rode at a canter toward the wall. As they approached the Watergate, 2 Goldcloaks stepped from the sentry post. A lean captain named Roslyn and her second-in-command, a grizzled veteran called Farron. Their cloaks shimmered in brass buttons, their swords at ease. They saluted Aegon and Argyll without hesitation. "My lord," Captain Roslyn said, voice tight, "we heard your offer. Lord Tycho Nestoris would see proof of your intentions before he parley." Aegon inclined his head. "Then bring us to the Braavosi envoy. Let this be done honestly, no traps, no assassins." He drew a scroll, sealed with black wax. "Read this to the hosts within, water and grain for every soul. Open the gates before sunset and swear fealty to House Targaryen. Close by sunset, and the maelstrom shall break upon these walls as it will upon their bones." Roslyn accepted the scroll, glancing at the seal. "I will deliver it," she vowed, mounting her horse. "Return to your lines. We'll let you know within the hour." Aegon remounted. As he turned to depart, the thrum of a lone horn rose from the city, a lamenting note that carried like a dirge over the ramparts. Below, the alleyways darkened with late-rising traffic. A woman pushing a cart of bread, children huddled around a baker's fire, rats scurrying beneath the cisterns. "Do you hear that?" Argyll asked. City's heartbeat," Aegon replied. "Soft, but certain." They rode back through the Targaryen host. Soldiers paused to dip their heads, to touch his horse's flank, to whisper prayers for their king. Aegon felt each as a quiet oath, binding them anew to his cause. Near the trebuchets, Maester Ormer, sent by Grand Maester Ebrose, knelt beside Aegon, offering a flask of spiced wine. "For courage," Ormer said, "and clarity." Aegon accepted with a nod. "Thank you, Maester." Ormer's eyes were bright with age. "Your father believed dragons were destiny. You have shown destiny can be rewritten. God grant that your valor holds against the cruelty of hunger and time." Aegon drained the cup. "Then God grant that mercy tempts them before steel." Inside King's Landing, the streets were quieter than usual. A sense of looming decision, hunger or revolt, weighed upon every face. In the low-ceilinged hall of Tycho Nestoris, the Braavosi Magnar tapped his slender fingers upon an obsidian table. His council, a motley of merchants, minor lords, and 2 silent septons, awaited the Goldcloak captain's report. When Captain Roslyn entered, bowing low, Nestoris asked, "He has spoken as you say." Roslyn drew Aegon's scroll and laid it before him. The Braavosi read, "Water, grain, gates." He chuckled softly. A fair bargain, if he meant it. This Targaryen shows more cunning than the last. He motioned to the septon. "Fetch me a peasant." The septon vanished into a back chamber, and returned with a dirt-streaked woman holding a battered wooden bowl. "Woman," Nestoris said, voice smooth, "do you fear hunger?" She trembled, clutching her bowl. "I fear my children will starve, my house fall in on me. I fear men with steel more than I fear men without it." "Then you understand the bargain?" He slid the scroll toward her. "Open the Watergate before sunset. Let the waters run free, let the granaries fill this bowl. Swear fealty to this Targaryen, and your children will live. Ben? She looked from the scroll to the Braavosi and back. Tears glittered on her cheeks. At last, she gripped the scroll with trembling fingers. I swear it, she whispered. Nestoris nodded to Roslin. See that it is done. Then word goes to the common folk. Mercy for loyalty. He turned to his council. And to the lords? We must appear united. Send emissaries to the Red Keep. Let our words echo through these walls. A broken dragon asks only for life. Shall we grant it? A murmur of assent rose. One merchant spoke. Better a pliant king than no king at all. A small lord added, let the Iron Throne be held by one who will not burn us with dragonfire. Nestoris tapped the scroll. Good. Then we act. By midday, the water gate swung open. A throng of ragged men and women poured through, eyes bright with hope, brimming with grain sacks and water skins. They knelt before the Targaryen lines, weeping prayers of thanks. Aegon watched from the mound, emotion tracing his pale features. Maekar approached, cloak drawn tight. They have yielded, brother. Aegon's lips curved in the faintest smile. Let them know they have not betrayed their city, only embraced their people. Send food to the slums. Let the common folk fill their bellies before the lords dine at the Red Keep. He paused, steeling himself. Then ride with me to the Lion Gate. I will offer the same terms to Sir Oswell Lannister. Argyll joined them. He may spurn mercy. Aegon nodded. Then we take the gate by force, and leave him alive to rue his pride. The three mounted and rode east, through the sea of grain and cheering commoners. The scent of fresh bread and steamed peas rose to meet them, mingling with the tang of sweat and steel. Aegon's heart swelled at the sight. A realm that could unite not by terror of dragons, but by the simple promise that no man would hunger for another's crowns. At the Lion Gate, Sir Oswell awaited upon the walls, his helm tucked beneath one arm. His white cloak whisked in the breeze. When he saw Aegon, he sneered. Ironborn routed, and a gate thrown open by starving peasants. What victory is this, dragonling? Aegon drew rein. Victory of mercy over might. I offer you the same terms. Open this gate by sunset, swear fealty, and your people eat. Refuse, and we take it, and leave none to beg crumbs. And none. Oswell laughed. A hollow sound. I have sworn fealty to no one but the Lion of Lannister. And this coup you call conquest, I will see it drown in my blood. Aegon inclined his head. So be it. He spurred blood-tide back down the road. Argyll and Maekar followed. Behind them, the Targaryen host gathered its siege engines toward the Lion Gate, the clang of chain and axe a grim overture. As they left, Aegon looked over his shoulder at the bowed head of every commoner kneeling to fill their jars. Brother, he said to Maekar, voice low, we fight not for walls, but for the people within. Let that be the Targaryen legacy, whether we crown them in gold or in mercy. Maekar's eyes glowed with pride. So it shall be, Aegon. So it shall be. Above them, unseen by either king, a single raven took wing from the battlements, bearing word of mercy, or war, into the heart of Westeros. A chill wind swept across the plain as dawn broke on the fourth day of Aegon's siege, a dawn that would mark not only the fate of King's Landing, but the very soul of Westeros. From the summit of the mound where he had watched the city kneel, Aegon Targaryen gazed down upon the Red Keep's walls, tapering upward like a crown of stone. He felt the weight of every oath he had gathered, every life he had spared or sacrificed, and knew that today the true trial would begin. He turned to Maekar, whose steady presence had guided him through victory and mercy alike. The Lannister gate holds fast still? He asked, voice low. Maekar nodded, tracing a finger along a hastily drawn map. Oswell confronts us with steel. He has refused our offer. He vows by lion fire and gold that no Targaryen, broken or whole, shall ever claim this city." Aegon's pale blue eyes narrowed. "Then we give him no quarter." He glanced down at the massed ranks of his host. Knights in battered plate, footmen braced behind sharpened stakes, trebuchets yawning wide like the throats of beasts. "Sound the horns," he commanded. "Let every banner know that at sunset the Lion Gate falls or lies in ruins." The blasts of war horns rolled across the camp, a thunderous echo that stirred the earth. At the first blast, Lord Argyll Baratheon rode forward, his black destrier prancing with urgency. "Your Grace," he said, dismounting briskly, "the siege engines stand ready. But the walls are high, and the city watch vigilant. To storm the gate will cost hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives." Aegon met his gaze steadily. "If they will not yield to reason, they will yield to steel. But we will strike with cunning, not just force. Send word to Sir Tybalt Connington. At noon he shall lead a feint at the Lion Gate with 1,000 Stormlanders. When the gate is fixed upon them, my host will wheel around the south wall and plant the scaling ladders at the Dustquay. We breach from 2 sides at once." "Ma'am?" Argyll exhaled, sorrow and resolve mingling in his eyes. "It is a bold plan, dangerous, but bold. It may work." Aegon laid a hand on his shoulder. "It will," raised his voice so that the captains around them could hear. "We strike at high noon. Let every man know what fate awaits those who would rather see their children starve than bow the knee." Then see. High noon saw the camp transformed into a hive of activity. Connington's griffin banner led the feint. Cavalry thundered toward the Lion Gate, a tidal wave of steel and color that drew the eyes of every city watcher. Behind them, archers loosed volleys that rattled against the parapets, while engineers lit the tinder beneath the gatehouse catapults, sending crashing logs into the lion's maw. At the same moment, unseen by the defenders, Aegon's second host circled southward under the cover of an abandoned weir, its dark wooden barrier once used for fish traps now fallen into disuse. There, amid tangled reeds and shallow pools, the Targaryens laid their scaling ladders. Tall iron-framed beasts, 6 men wide, bristling with hooks and spikes to anchor them in the stone. Aegon watched as the first ladder found purchase against the dust-scored stones of the southern wall. He and Maekar led the climbers up the slope, their Gaiwan lances thrust aside by storming feet. As the Iron Throne's walls trembled with the impact of Connington's feint, the ladders bit deep into stone, and the Targaryens poured up the sides like avenging ghosts. Inside the city, the defenders reeled. Sir Oswell Lannister, hearing of the breach, abandoned the Lion Gate in haste, racing toward the south wall with a small host of gold cloaks and household knights. But they were too late. Aegon's men had already scaled the battlements, smashing through the wooden palisades with fierce blows. Aegon himself led the charge onto the ramparts. His pale hair flew loose. His surcoat, once pristine, was torn and stained with grime. Across the battlements, he met Sir Oswell in single combat, blade against blade, lionfire steel against the younger Targaryens' coursing determination. Around them, soldiers clashed, banners torn and replanted, until the crest of House Lannister fluttered beneath the broken dragon talon. With a final, shattering strike, Aegon's sword sheared Oswell's helm in 2. The Lannister knight fell, clutching his shattered pride and life at his breast. At the sight, the city watch faltered and then broke, scattering like frightened crows. Aegon's host surged forward, driving into the streets beyond. By evening, the Lion Gate lay in ruins, its great stones rent asunder by trebuchet and hammer. Targaryen banners flew above the shattered arch, and torches glowed in every alley. Aegon stood before the Red Keep's outer walls, flanked by Argyll and Maekar. The air smelled of smoke and victory. He lifted his voice so that even within the thick walls his words could carry. "People of King's Landing, today you have seen that mercy can be forged in steel, and that a king's promise is stronger than a dragon's fire. Bend the knee now, and you shall know safety and peace. Rise in rebellion, and your city will burn in the flame of your own making." And silence followed, broken only by the distant clang of cleanup and the groans of the wounded. Then, From a tower window above the gate, a lone figure, cloaked in black, stepped forward. Grand Maester Aegon, his robes dusted with ash. He held aloft a sealed scroll, the great seal of the Iron Throne. Taking it, Aegon broke the seal and read aloud. By decree of Aegon Targaryen, first of his name, heir of Valyria, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, let all who have gathered beneath these walls know that this realm shall henceforth be ruled by the consent of its people and the honor of its lords. Let no man hunger, let no child cry, let every voice be heard. To those who kneel, mercy, to those who defy justice without favor. A cheer rolled up the walls and cascaded down into the streets. Commoners poured into the square, bakers, blacksmiths, beggars, kneeling before their new king with tears of relief. Knights and nobles followed, bending on one knee before Aegon, their swords planted tip down in the dirt. Aegon Baratheon stepped forward, raising his warhammer high. I swear fealty to King Aegon, he declared. I give you my sword, my shield, and my heart. Maekar Targaryen unfolded his arms to encompass the throng. So shall all the Seven Kingdoms give their oaths, he proclaimed. So shall this realm be reborn. Stronger for its trials, united not by fear, but by the bonds of trust we have forged. Below, the common folk surged forward, pressing toward Aegon, begging for bread, for water, for the promise of a new age. He raised his hand for silence. All of you, he said, voice carrying like a bell, are the heart of Westeros. By your will, this realm stands. By your loyalty, it endures. I vow as your king to keep you safe, to feed you in famine, to protect your homes from fire and sword. And I pledge that never again shall a Targaryen reign by dragonfire alone, but by the enduring flame of justice and mercy. Then, as the sun set behind the Red Keep, the people of King's Landing raised their voices in unison, a great chorus of hope and destiny. Across the Seven Kingdoms, ravens flew with word of conquest without dragons, a conquest of hearts rather than fear. And in the silent towers of Dragonstone, far across the narrow sea, hidden eggs trembled with life at the promise of a realm made whole by the courage of those who dared to rule, not with compassion, but with compassion. Thus, the conquest that never was by dragonfire became the conquest that would forever be known as the moment of mercy, a new beginning for Westeros, where the greatest flame was the human spirit, and the truest dragons were the vows sworn in loyalty and love. Oh. A hush fell over King's Landing as Aegon's words faded into the cooling air. The heralds ceased their trumpets. The clang of steel died away, and for a moment all stood as one, commoners and nobles alike, united by the promise of a king who had conquered not with dragonfire, but with mercy. Yet even as the first embers of a new age glowed in the crowd's heart, Aegon knew the true trials of his reign were only beginning. Night deepened over the city, and within the Red Keep's grand solar, Aegon sat across the polished oak table from Grand Maester Aegon, Sir Aegon Baratheon, and Maekar Targaryen. Tapers guttered in iron sconces, casting wavering shadows on the maps and scrolls that lay before them. We have secured the capital, Aegon began, voice low but firm. But there remains unrest in the Riverlands and the north. Riverrun's lords hesitate, and the clans beyond the neck still clutch at half-forgotten freedoms. We must bind them to our cause, by right, by treaty, or by force. Then, Ser Argyll dipped his head. My scouts report that the Blackwood and Bracken houses teeter between pledging fealty and joining the Stormlander hosts under House Durrandon. They fear your rule is but a fragile promise untested in the wild. Maekar unfolded a scroll. And in the north, Lord Edric Stark demands proof that we will honor the old laws of Winterfell. He will not bend knee until the Night's Watch is left untouched, and the North's ancient customs are respected. Aegon leaned forward, hands clasped. Then let us send envoys bearing oaths, tangible proof of our intentions. To River Run offer a marriage alliance. My sister, once promised to Volantis, shall wed a Tully heir, binding blood to blood. To Winterfell, send Maester Ormer, accompanied by 20 knights, bearing the Treaty of the North, a guarantee of their rights, sealed with the dragon's broken talon and the Ambrose placed a hand on the table. Your Grace, treaties are only as strong as the ink that binds them. We should also leave hostages, children of the Tullys and Starks, to be fostered at King's Landing, ensuring good faith. Argyl's brow furrowed. Hostages may secure fealty, but they breed resentment. It could inflame old grudges. Aegon's jaw tightened. Then let them be honored guests, not prisoners. Let them learn our court's ways, dine at my table, grow familiar with Targaryen fairness. When they return home, they will carry not bitterness, but respect. Maekar nodded slowly. A king's mercy can reshape hearts, if wielded wisely. Aegon rose, drawing on every ounce of resolve. Send the envoys at first light, and prepare a force for the Riverlands. No more than 1,000 knights, to accompany them as honor guard. Let Riverrun see we trust them with our strength, not threaten them with it. Before dawn broke, the royal pavilion outside the city walls buzzed with activity. Envoys in Tully blue and stark gray stepped lightly across the dewy grass. A company of Baratheon knights formed a chivalric guard, their lances gilded and banners unfurled. Maester Ormer laid out the Treaty of the North on a small pedestal. A parchment bearing the 7-pointed star and the direwolf, sealed with red wax. His voice carried in the chilled air as he read the terms. Let it be known that Aegon Targaryen, first of his name, protector of the realm, grants to the North the freedom to adjudicate their internal affairs by the old laws of Winterfell, so long as no ravens fly south bearing breach of the king's peace. Let the Night's Watch stand unmolested, their vows sacred beneath the wall, and let the North's banners unfurl within the Red Keep's hall, as equals among the realm's great houses. Menorwa. To Riverrun, Aegon's sister, Princess Elenara Targaryen, stepped forward in a gown of riverine green. Though only 17, her bearing was regal and calm. I offer my hand and my heart to Raventree Hall's heir, she declared, voice clear. May our union bind the river's flow to the tide of the Iron Throne. The Tully patriarch, Lord Cregan, stooped to kiss her hand, tears glinting in his eyes. The northern envoy, a stern-faced Stark knight, bowed in silence, his gray cloak rustling like north wind through pines. Within a week, hostages turned guests arrived in King's Landing. In the Red Keep's courtyard, Prince Torrhen Stark and Lady Alysanne Tully were greeted with open arms. A grand feast was held in their honor, tables groaning beneath venison, roasted boar, fresh trout, and wheels of honeyed cheese. Aegon sat at the high table, listening as Cregan Tully reminisced about Tytos Lannister's broken promises. And Edric Stark recalled the old pact with House Arryn that had ended the long winters. The mountain clans threatened to march south when rumors spread you would burn the neck, my king. Edric confessed between sips of spiced wine. Now I see you send envoys, not armies. That is mercy indeed. Aegon inclined his head. A sword is my right arm, but reason and mercy must guide its thrust. The North will stand with us, but let it be known they stand of their own will. Ben? Across the table, Maekar caught his eye and offered a slight smile. The grand design of alliances was beginning to take shape, forged not merely through conquest, but through bonds of blood and trust. News of the Targaryen court's magnanimity spread like wildfire through the 7 kingdoms. In the Reach, Lady Helena Tyrell sent a crimson rose to Aegon, accompanied by a pledge of men and grain. In Dorne, Prince Martin Nymeros Martell offered the marriage of his daughter to Aegon's cousin, forging peace with the Sunspear Sands. The Iron Islands, humbled by their defeat at Blackwater Rush, and the mercy shown to their own thralls, saw reconciliation as the wiser path. Lord Vitar Greyjoy knelt before the Iron Throne, promising to curb reaving in exchange for formal recognition of the Ironborn's place among the realm. Yet while tongues spoke of peace, banners still flew in the Riverlands and Stormlands, small uprisings fueled by lords who resented Targaryen rule, however tempered. A band of Blackwood loyalists burned a supply convoy outside Tumbleton. Durandon rebels ambushed a Baratheon patrol near Storm's End, leaving broken shields and bitter curses in the sand. Aegon, upon hearing this, rode from King's Landing with Sir Ardal and a contingent of the King's Guard. They found the broken road slick with blood and the bodies of farmers caught in the crossfire. Among the dead was a young girl, no older than 10, clutching a wooden toy dragon to her chest. He dismounted and knelt beside her, lifting the toy and dusting it gently. Anger flared within him, but sorrow tempered his rage. "No more children's bones," he whispered, voice thick. He looked up at Argyll. "Let steel fall upon those who spill innocent blood. But let mercy spare the common folk who bear the scars of lords' ambitions." Argyll bowed. "As you command, my king." Thus Aegon's armies moved swiftly to quell pockets of unrest, yet always with restraint. Garrisons were installed not to oppress, but to protect. Royal decrees sent grain and coin to rebuilding villages, and local lords were summoned to swear oaths of non-aggression under penalty of outlawry. In the 9th month of his reign, Aegon convened the first great council of Westeros, in the Sept of Baelor, illuminated by 1,000 candles. Lords and ladies, small folk and sworn knights, all gathered beneath the Sept's lofty arches. Aegon stood before the seven-faced Septon, who read aloud the charter of the realm. "Woo, the lords and ladies of the Seven Kingdoms, recognizing the Targaryen king's mercy and valor, hereby establish a council to advise the crown, comprising representatives from each region, both noble and common. We pledge to govern not by whim, but by law, not by terror, but by consent." Then war. A hush fell as the Septon lowered his voice. Then, one by one, the assembled peoples cheered, voices rising like a tide. For the first time in history, the realm of Westeros was poised not under the tyranny of dragons, but guided by the collective will of its people. Aegon's gaze swept the crowd. He saw hope in peasant eyes, pride in noble ones, and unity in banners once at war. At that moment, he understood that his true conquest was not of lands or castles, but of hearts, and that a king's legacy was built not in fire and blood, but in justice and mercy. And so, under the flickering light of the Sept of Baelor, Aegon Targaryen, first of his name, vowed to lead Westeros into a new age, a realm where dragons were remembered in legend, but men's deeds lit the fires of history. A fortnight passed since the convocation in the Sept of Baelor, yet the calm of King's Landing was deceiving. Beneath its gleaming streets, whispers gathered like storm clouds, of wronged bannermen, resentful smallfolk, and distant eyes in Essos that watched Aegon's mercy with both envy and suspicion. The true test of his new order would lie not in the soft halls of the capital, but on the far-flung frontiers of a realm unspoken for centuries without dragonfire. In the pale dawn of the first moon of the second year, Aegon rose before the sun, slipping from his chambers into the quiet of the word of the stranger. There, cloaked and unheralded, he moved through shadowed halls to the dragon pit, that silent amphitheater of stone that had stood empty since the doom. The gates, iron-bound, carved with draconic coils, had been reopened at his command, scrubbed of soot and graffiti, transformed into the House of Images, where the realm's history was recorded in murals and tapestries. Yet Aegon's eyes sought a different prize. The ashes of the broken dragon eggs, sealed within glass reliquaries beneath the central dais. Beside him strode Maekar, quieter than usual, burdened by thought. "They say the last Targaryen brood died with Helena's tears in the Fury Isles," he murmured. "No living dragon has soared since Balerion's death a century past." Aegon paused before the largest reliquary, etched with a dragon's skeletal ribs. "And yet, we found these," he replied, hand-brushing the glass. Within, a sole egg, ashen and faintly veined, lay cold. "Maekar, you believed me when I said mercy could replace dragonfire. But a king must also wield awe. We cannot rule solely by parchment and promise." Maekar's pale face darkened with resolve. "Then we must try what our forefathers feared. Rekindle the ancient bond. If these eggs yet harbor life, it will not be by sorcery alone, but by the blood of a dragon lord. Aegon let the words hover. He felt the old weight in his veins. The lure of flame, the call of wings. Behind him, the sun broke over Coruscant's skyline, gilding the ruined white stone. "Prepare the ritual chamber," he said at last. "Fetch the maesters of the citadel, those versed in old Valyrian lore, and the warlocks of Lys. I will not send them to crouch in alleys as heralds, but sit with the small council, trusted as equals. Then see." By noon, the high tower's highest chamber had been draped in smoked glass and midnight silks. At its center, an oval table bore the egg, swaddled in ash and woven vine. Around it gathered Grand Maester Aegon, 3 Lysine warlocks crowned with waxed braids, and a conclave of 3 citadel scholars. On one side sat Aegon and Maekar, on the other Sir Argyll and Princess Elenara. Tapestries depicted the doom of Valyria, the fall of Old Kais, and the last day of Balerion. Aegon cleared his throat. "If your grace wills the attempt, we must invoke the old rites. The song of flame, the fraying of night, the breath of parent and child. None have been sung in this chamber for 1,000 years. The words survive in fragments, but combined with blood, they may stir the living spark." The Lysine warlock, Saraiza of the Crimson Veil, offered a vial of vermilion liquid, dragon's blood, distilled and sharpened. "It will open the embryo's latent breath, if any remains." Aegon rose and drew a ceremonial dagger, Valyrian steel, black as smoke, etched with silver runes. He placed his fingers upon the hilt, then let the song begin. He sliced his palm, letting a crimson drop fall upon the eggshell. Beside him, Maekar did the same, until the reliquary was bespattered in twin droplets of royal blood. The Lysine warlock began to hum, low and resonant. The maesters joined in faltering, rasping syllables that wove like smoke through the chamber, twisting and tangling. Moments stretched like centuries. The egg's ash crackled, a hairline fracture spread across its surface, glowing faintly green. The assembled scholars froze. Then, with a sound like a sigh and a shudder, the shell split. A thin, opaline wing unfolded, followed by a mottled head, no larger than a hound's. Its eyes, molten bronze, flickered open. Aegon stepped forward, awe smothering his voice. "By the old tongue it lives." Maekar exhaled, relief and wonder colliding. A phoenix reborn. Sir Argyll touched the cramped chamber's oak floor. "My king, what shall we name her?" Aegon knelt beside the creature, cupping it in his gauntleted hands. The young dragon cooed, trembling like a newborn fawn. "We name her Vermax," Aegon said softly. "Flame of mercy." Word of Vermax hatching swept through Coruscant. By nightfall, servants and guards alike paused on shadowed staircases to whisper in reverence. Even the hardened goldcloaks felt something shift. Outside the city, banners of Targaryen intent brushed in the wind. And in the Riverlands, the remaining dissidents halted raids to send riders bearing gifts. A live hope at last. Yet challenges remained. To the south, in the wastes below Sunspear, House Corgyle rebelled, claiming that dragon blood and mercy alike would fail to feed their parched lands. In the east, Esose merchants, of Norvos and Myre, questioned the Targaryens' right to command beasts born of Valyria's gravestones. And in the north, Lord Manderly doubted any creature of flame could thrive beyond the wall, where ancient magic slept. Aegon convened the small council in the solar of the Red Keep. Beside Maekar and Argyll sat Princess Elenara, Sir Tybalt Connington, and Master of Coin Joffrey Hay. Reports lay before them. Skirmishes in Dorne. A flotilla of Pentoshi galleys crowding Blackwater Bay. Murmurings of a merchant alliance seeking to undermine the Targaryen mint. "It is no longer enough to bless the people with mercy," Aegon conceded, "nor enough to awe them with a dragonlet. We must show our strength as well as our compassion." He tapped the parchment. "We hold Sunspear in name only. I will ride south with Vermax upon my shoulder, as both king and keeper, and bring Corgyle to heel. Let the banners from the Boneway to the Red Mountains line our approach, an army of peace, but armed for battle. Bendarwand. Ardil's hand rose. I will lead the Stormlanders, my king. And I will see that Sunspear falls not by siege or slaughter, but by the voice of its own princes. Offer them the chance to swear oaths beneath Vermax's wings. Few will refuse the sight of the living flame. Maekar nodded. And I shall take ship for Pentos and Mire. A letter from your hand, carried by the winds of Essos, accompanied by a hatchling in a caged brilliance, will secure their allegiance in trade and coin. Now, Elenara rose, gown trailing like a river of silver, and I will convene the Septons and Septas of the faith. A living dragon, born of mercy and mercy's kin, will be the clearest sermon of the faith militant, that the gods favor a king who spares lives as well as claims thrones. Thus was settled the next phase of Aegon's reign, a journey of mercy made mighty by the echo of dragons. In the first light of the dawn to come, King Aegon would ride south with Vermax aloft, his court divided across land and sea to weave alliances of blood, gold, and faith. Yet beneath the promise of rebirth lurked the ancient fear that mercy tempered by awe could forge not a kingdom, but a cage. For when dragons awake, the songs of men grow hushed, and the bounds of mercy are tested by the fire that seeks to consume all. And so, as dawn's first shafts gilded the Red Keep's walls, Aegon tightened the reins, Vermax's fledgling roar echoing against stone, and prepared to lead a realm into an age where dragons lived again, not as conquerors, but as the living proof that mercy and majesty need not be enemies, but two halves of a single blazing truth. The path southward lay before him, through deserts of shifting sand, across the fractured loyalty of spear-wielders and spearphobes alike. There, under the sons of Dorne, the trial of mercy would truly begin. Kai. Yawen. Aegon led the host out of King's Landing before dawn's first blush, the hush of the world awakening all around him. Vermax nestled against his breastplate, its nascent wings twitching in the cold air as if tasting the dawn breeze. The Queen's road ahead wound southward, first through fertile fields that greened with spring, then into the stony passes that led toward Dorne's borderlands, every banner fluttering in his wake. The broken dragon talon newly whole, the stag, the trout, the sun-forked spear, seemed to carry a promise of peace, even as steel clanged on harness straps, and the soles of horseshoes struck sparks from flint. For days they rode beneath cool skies and mild spring rains, the land opening before them in waves of meadow and river and oak grove. At River Run, Princess Elenara and Maester Ormer had arranged for supplies. A feast of fresh trout, loaves of honeyed bread, casks of vintage arbor red, for both lords and common soldiers alike. There, in the shadow of the ancient castle's gray walls, Aegon permitted his host to rest. Children who had never seen a Targaryen king crept forward to touch Vermax's newborn horns, their laughter echoing beneath the towers as Aegon walked among them, sharing morsels of fruit and bread until their innocent joy banished all weariness from his heart. In those quiet moments, he felt again the true weight of kingship. Not the clash of steel on walls, but the trust of simple folk who hung on every word. He stayed long enough to see Lord Cragen Tully kneel and sip from a silver goblet inscribed with both trout and talon, then pressed southward beneath skies that warmed with every league, the dry heat pressing in as he passed the Greenblood's mouth and struck across the sand-swept expanse toward the Red Mountains. Dorne lay ahead like a grim challenge written in sun-bleached stone. The Dornish border riders, slender men in padded tunics, met him at the marches beneath the ruined towers of Skyreach. They had sent word. Princess Nymeria Martell herself would parley at dawn's edge, flanked by the spears of Sunspear and the silent faces of the Sand Snakes. Aegon's heart thudded with both anticipation and a warrior's caution. Dorne had never bowed easily, and the salt and spice of its deserts bred lords as hard as ironwood. When he rode into the courtyard of Sunspear, the first light turned the pink walls to rose. Across the mosaic floor stood Princess Nymeria, garbed in the white of Dornish summer. 3 rakish spears planted in the sand before her. Behind her lingered Ilaria Sand and her daughters, their eyes sharp and glittering like desert gems. A hush fell as Aegon advanced, Vermax's scales catching the dawn in flickers of bronze. King Aegon Targaryen. Nymeria's voice was soft as desert dusk, yet carried clear across the courtyard. You come with dragons and mercy both. Which do you wield against Dorne, flame or kindness? Aegon dismounted, bowing deeply. Princess of Sunspear, I wield mercy first, for no child of Dorne should fear the winged flame. But I bring Vermax as witness that my mercy is not hollow. I offer peace, trade rights at King's Landing, the restoration of Dornish customs in my courts, joint guardianship of the Prince's Pass. Swear fealty, and your sands shall never thirst again beneath a cruel crown. Refuse, and I will call upon Vermax to scorch these stones to glass. Bah! Nymeria's gaze drifted to the young dragon, its head tilting as though studying her. Around the courtyard, the assembled Dornish lords murmured. Ilaria's laughter, soft yet edged, rippled through the hush. At length, Nymeria enclosed her hands before her. I am no stranger to dragon's wrath, but I have heard of dragon's hearts. Let us test the truth of your mercy. She dipped her hand toward a waterskin set on a low stone table. Drink, and swear by the 1,000 gods of sand and sky that Dorne shall remain free in all things but crown. Aegon lifted the skin, its cool leather heavy in his grip. He drank, the water sweet as new spring, then pressed his hand to his heart. By the 7, the old gods, the Lord of Light, and the gods of sand and sea, I swear to uphold Dornish law in my hall, to provide water and food in times of drought, to honor Nymeria Martell's place in my small council. He lowered the skin and offered it back. In return, I ask but the sword of Dorne anointed to the Iron Throne. Nymeria's lips curved in a smile like the crescent moon. She drank, then offered the skin to her council, who partook in solemn succession. So it shall be, she said. Let our banners join yours, that the snake and dragon fly side by side. Tyrion flew the 2 standards. Below the Martell spear, Aegon's dragon rose anew. Cheers rose from Dornish spearmen, and Aegon allowed himself a rare grin. Vermax emitted a coo of contentment, wings folding as though acknowledging the bond. In the days that followed, Aegon's host wound deeper into Dorne, through red dust and jagged passes, past ancient mines and oses, where streams ran clear and tents offered shade and spiced wine. Everywhere the people welcomed him. Town guards set out barrels of salted fish. Fishermen on the Boneway sent their wives to fill Aegon's camp with catch. In Loren's keep, children sang Targaryen songs in the courtyards as he passed. Yet not all was tranquil. In the Boneway's deepest gorges, pockets of rebels, Corgile men and rogue reavers from the Stepstones, lay in ambush. Aegon rode with Argyll and Ilaria's youngest daughter, Tyene, ahead of the column. As they rounded a bend, hidden assailants sprang forth, arrows whistling and crossbows thundering. Argyll drew his hammer, deflecting a bolt with iron, while Tyene's twin daggers flared in deadly arcs. Aegon, sword in hand, leapt to the fray, Vermax roaring overhead in a brilliant cry that scattered archers into flight. When the skirmish ended, the canyon floor was littered with broken pikes and the stale odor of blood. Aegon knelt by a fallen Dornish spearman, checking his pulse. The man's breath came ragged. Aegon pressed a handkerchief to the wound. "You fight for Dorne's freedom," he said gently. "And now you fight for your life. Rise and drink to the promise we keep to you all." "Dan?" The spearman's eyes brightened with tears as Aegon offered him water. Word of the mercy shown on that rocky ground spread among the host. The king did not abandon the fallen, be they friend or foe. And so, where desert had bred suspicion, kindness now planted seeds of loyalty. By the time the caravan reached the old city of Yronwood, word had preceded them. The King of Mercy, the young dragon, the boundless oaths. The gates opened without siege engines, and Lord Dorne's pride tempered as he joined Aegon's council beneath the desert moon to plan the rebuilding of trade routes, the erection of new wells, the sharing of royal knowledge on irrigation and governance. And all the while, Vermax grew, her shimmering scales absorbing the heat of the suns, until at night she glowed faintly like embers. Aegon watched her in wonder, recalling the fear he had once felt at the mention of dragons. Fear now replaced by reverence for the bond that bound them. Thus Aegon's southern march became legend, a host that conquered not by burning walls, but by lighting hearts, a king who bore mercy as armor, and a dragon born in ash who learned to give warmth rather than destruction. In the sandy courts of Dorne, beneath the scorching sky and the flecked stars, the trial of mercy found its triumph, and a new chapter in the annals of Westeros, one written by the twin flames of compassion and awe. The dawn wind off the summer sea carried salt and promise as Aegon's host broke camp outside the city of Euronwood. The banners of Dragon Talon and Sun-forked Spear fluttered side by side in the pale light, while Vermax, now nearly the size of a great mastiff, stretched her wings atop a low mesa and gave a triumphant cry that echoed through the desert passes. Behind the king and his knights, the ancient wastes of Dorne lay still, their red dunes rolling westward toward the sunset sea. Before them, the storm-swept coasts of the narrow sea beckoned, and with them, the prospect of new alliances and fresh challenges. Aegon rode at the head of his host, the memory of his parley with Nymeria Martell still vivid in his mind. The drink of water and the oath of sand, the hush that fell as dragon and desert met. Below the pass, lances bristled at the gorge's mouth. Corgyle rebels assembled hastily in the hopes of intercepting a weakened vanguard. Yet when they saw Vermax's massive silhouette against the sunrise, many of them knelt in fear rather than charge in defiance. Only a handful dared to lift pikes, and those few met the hammer of Argyll Baratheons strike before Aegon himself rode through, offering terms of surrender that brought more followers than steel. By midday the host had rejoined the main column, and scouts reported that the Red Mountains of Dorne had been pacified. Minor houses had sworn fealty, desert nomads had been summoned to the host's flank, and the road to the Boneway lay open. Aegon signaled his captains to rest the horses and break out fresh grains. As the soldiers refilled their meal pouches, he dismounted and strode to Vermax's pen, where the young dragon nuzzled at a trough of salted mutton. Kneeling beside her, he ran a gauntleted finger across the faint ridges of her snout. "Soon," he whispered, "we ride for Essos. You will see the bright cities your ancestors once ruled and learn that men can befriend dragons as much as they once feared them." Vermax cooed, a bubbling sound like water over pebbles, and Aegon smiled. He knew that beyond the sea lay ambitions that could not be tamed by mercy alone. In Pentos and Norvos, the merchant princes coveted trade routes. In Myre and Lys, the warlocks eyed Valyrian bloodlines with envy and dread. His sister Elenara, now en route with her own retinue, had promised to open the gates of Pentos with a gift of grain and grain alone, to show that the new Targaryen reign cherished life over profit. Yet he resolved that if gold were needed to bind treaties, it would come, not from forced extortion, but from fair tariffs and honest commerce. That evening, after the host had pitched camp in a sheltered valley, Aegon convened his council by torchlight. The glow illuminated their faces, Argyl's stern resolve, Maekar's thoughtful gaze, Elenara's soft determination, and Princess Nymeria's wry smile from Dorne's envoy behind them. "We cross to Pentos at dawn," Aegon began. "Elenara will bear our letters. Maekar will see to the warlocks of Lys, who claim power over dragons' minds. Argyll, take a detachment to secure the harbor at Volantis if they grant us safe passage. Let our fleet be ready. I will lead the main host into the city, offering grain and water to all who ask, but demanding only the right to trade and a seat at their council." "Bewal." Maekar cleared his throat. "There are whispers in Lys that dragons are omens of doom, not hope. The warlocks may seek to bind Vermax's mind, or claim her as their own. We must guard her, not only with steel, but with cunning." Elenara touched Aegon's sleeve. "Let me travel ahead with 5 trusted knights. I will host the Pentoshi regent and show that a Targaryen sister's hand is given freely, not extorted by fear." I will also distribute damask silks, woven by Dornish artisans, that they see this alliance as a celebration of cultures, not a transaction of power." "Ben." Aegon nodded, pride warming him like the morning sun. "So be it. And let us not forget those who still doubt us. Vitar Greyjoy in the Iron Islands sends word that he chafes under our rule. Once our eastward mission is secure, we will sail for the Sunset Sea and remind Harlaw and good brother alike that mercy does not mean weakness." At dawn, the first longship slid from the sands into gentle surf, its oaken hull creaking in glad greeting. Along its deck, Argyll superintended the loading of trebuchets and supply crates. Beyond, in the cab of a larger gallus, Aegon supervised the penning of Vermax's tinderbox-sized cage. Stout iron bars enough to restrain claws, but wide enough to let sunlight in. The harbor's quay was alive with movement as ships from Sunspear's fleet joined the Targaryen armada. White-sailed vessels bearing the Dornish Sun and Spear, the Riverlander Trout and Talon, and 2 small coracles flown by Associ traders, curious to witness a living dragon. Elenara's courier ship, flying a white sail embroidered with emerald coursers, set out first. Maekar and half the warlocks followed at a measured distance. Aegon and Argyll took the main galley, its prow carved in the shape of a coiled dragon, unrolling for flight. When they cleared the channel, the sea opened before them like a pane of glass, and the eastern horizon glowed with the promise of distant marble cities. As they reached the shipping lanes beyond the stepstones, Aegon felt the thrill of anticipation. He knew that once they touched Pentosi quaystones, once they offered grain to famished children of the narrow sea's shores, his reign would stand or fall not by conquest of castles, but by the trade of goodwill and the forging of a new world where dragons flew not as tyrants, but as partners in peace. And at his side, Vermax stirred, her wings flexing, as though tasting the winds of destiny that carried them toward an age unimagined by any who had ever sung of Aegon the Conqueror. Aegon awoke to the low roll of waves against the galley's hull, the scent of salt and dawn's faint chill on the air. Vermax, stowed in her reinforced pen aft, raised her head and regarded him with molten eyes that flickered like embers in the half-light. He went to her side and laid a hand upon her scaled snout. "Soon," he murmured, "you will feel the stones of Pentos beneath your claws, and know that this journey was more than a ruler's whim." The deck buzzed as the crew prepared for landfall. Argyll Baratheon stood near the prow, cloak whipping behind him, surveying the masts of Pentoshi galleys and merchantmen bobbing beyond the harbor mouth. Aegon joined him, cloak thrown back to catch the breeze. "Are we ready?" he asked. Argyll turned, his gaze steady. "The harbor is cleared and flags raised. The Pentoshi regent has sent word that he and his council will meet your sister at the docks, before our main contingent moves ashore. They will wish to see the dragon, proof that your reach extends beyond fear." Aegon nodded. He patted Vermax's flank through the bars, then strode to the helm. "Let them see mercy and marvel both," he said. "Prepare the gangplank." Minutes later, the galley grated against the wooden quay. A dozen Libyan walkers in silken turbans and silver vambraces stood ready, and on a raised platform flanked by draped tapestries, Elenara Targaryen awaited, gown of river-green silk pooling at her feet. Across the plank, a retinue of Pentoshi elders, bearded men in golden robes stitched with wave patterns, stepped forward, led by the handsome, hawk-nosed Regent Erasmus. As the plank lowered, Aegon led Vermax, her wings carefully folded, down the slope, the guards parting at her approach. A hush fell over all who watched. Common fishwives clutching pottery jars, sailors with oilskins, beggars perched on barrels. Even the gulls seemed to pause. Elenara stood aside, curtsying on blood-stained deck planks. Aegon bowed his head, hand on the dragon's crest. "Regent Erasmus, I bring you grain for your people, mercy for your allies, and a dragon hatched not by prophecy, but by the hands of mortals who dared to hope." Erasmus's eyes darted from king to dragon, then to the sacks of white flour piled on carts behind Aegon's host. A faint smile touched his lips. "King Aegon, of the first flame and last mercy," he intoned. "You honor us. Let this dragon's presence remind Pentos that though the Valyrian wings have long since crumbled, New wings may yet bear us to prosperity. Be welcome ashore. Menin? The crowd exhaled, and as the carts rolled forward, children pressed to taste the flour, and women wept with relief. Aegon and Elenara walked beside the regent toward the city gate. Vermax's cage carried on a covered wagon draped in tarps of crimson and silver. Argyll and 100 knights formed an honor guard, their lances gleaming, but lowering in salute rather than threat. At the gatehouse, a herald rang a brass bell. People of Pentos, your king comes in peace, bearing gifts to fill hungry stomachs and promising alliances to fill empty coffers. Choose whether to fear dragons or to feast with them. Ems. Corporate groans of delight rippled through the watchers. Elenara inclined her head to her brother. The crowd's with us, she whispered, but the merchants in their tall houses may grumble. Aegon smiled, confidence hardening his features. Let them grumble. We build fortunes through fair trade, not forced tariffs. We sail to Bravos next, and Lys afterward. Then the world will see that our reign is measured not in coin taken, but in prosperity given. Menosau. In the grand plaza before the palace, Regent Erasmus convened the merchant princes and lordly representatives beneath a colonnade of white marble. Aegon stepped forward, unaccompanied by steel, and unrolled a parchment sealed with the broken talon and the wave. By the authority of the Iron Throne and the will of its people, he proclaimed, I grant Pentos free trade in grain and salt, duty levied only to maintain harbor walls and care for the poor. In return, I request your partnership in renewing the old road beyond these walls, that the merchants of Dorne, the Reach, and the Riverlands may pass without fear of toll or ambush. No. Murmurs rose. Some spoke of lost Lannister tolls, others of the old days when Pentos raised its prices to starve rivals. As the throng parted, an elderly merchant named Hexamus, gray-robed and gold-bedecked, stepped forward. King Aegon, he rasped, your terms are generous, but the Levantine guilds insist on their share. Why should we bind ourselves to a distant crown? Aegon met his gaze evenly. Because a kingdom built on fear is brittle as ice. A kingdom built on trust endures like granite. You may demand gold, but you will earn more by trade under honest rules than by speculation under unpredictable taxes. Silence fell. Then Hexamus glanced at his fellows, 5 speaking in low tones before nodding. He turned back. Very well. Pentos shall join your realm as a partner, not a subject. We agree. A cheer swept the plaza. Aegon inclined his head to Hexamus, then stood tall before the crowd. Let this day mark the beginning of a new age, one where dragons fly not to burn, but to lift, and where mercy is the mightiest flame. As the sun dipped low, Vermax emerged from her cage onto a raised dais. With gentle coaxing, Maekar stepped forward to stroke her smooth scales and signal. The dragon spread her wings, casting a vast shadow, then unfurled them in a ripple of bronze light, rising above the marble colonnade to circle the harbor thrice before settling back upon the dais. The crowd gasped in wonder. Children cheered. Merchants bowed. That night, Aegon feasted with the merchant princes in a grand hall lit by wave-motif lanterns. Platters of spiced fish and olive-fat bread passed beneath tapestries depicting Valyria's glory. Regent Erasmus raised a goblet of pink-tinted riot wine. To King Aegon, he toasted. May your mercy ring louder than any dragon's roar. Aegon drank and replied, voice clear and resonant. May our deeds outshine our legends, and may Vermax's wings guard us all. As laughter and music filled the night, Aegon slipped away to the gallery overlooking the harbor. There, Argyll joined him in silence. Below, the merchant ships bobbed in pattern, and faraway fires dotted the walls of Bravos across the water. We have won hearts here, Aegon said, tracing Vermax's silhouette against the moon. But the true test lies ahead. Bravos does not barter in grain, nor Lys in silk. They crave power. Argyll's face was grave. Then we give them both mercy and majesty. We sail at first light. Aegon nodded. For every frontier we cross, we carry mercy as our standard, and a dragon's truth in our hands. And so, beneath Pento's marble arches, and by the light of Dragonfire's promise. The conquest without flame pressed onward, forging a new destiny for Westeros and Essos alike. One alliance at a time, bound not by fear, but by the unquenchable spark of hope.